I removed her arms from my neck and lifted her up. As I was moving her, I happened to glance across the deck. There was Jim and Carol, next to each other. They were speaking softly together but were really watching me fend off this drunk girl. Suddenly, I knew what was up. This whole party was a setup. They were trying to manipulate me into behaving as they had at the charity event. This sexy girl was basically throwing herself at me, trying to get me to behave badly so I wouldn't be able to criticize them. I shot my wife a harsh stare. She caught my look, cringed, and realized I was onto their trick. I kept my eyes on my conniving wife as I kept pushing the girl away. When she wouldn't stop pestering me, I unceremoniously shoved her off my lap. The people around us were laughing as I marched across the deck, away from this cheap bimbo. I passed by Jim and growled, "Nice try, a-hole." His expression darkened as I marched away. A few moments later, Carol came trotting over, probably to deny there was any ulterior motive. I didn't want to hear any more lies. When she started to say something, I cut her off with a glare. The party was in full swing as I informed my wife it was time to leave. She looked disappointed but didn't argue. I didn't bother to thank Jim for the invitation and went straight to my car. Carol said it was impolite not to thank him, so she made her way to Jim and his date. She spoke to them for a bit as Jim glanced over at me with a strange look. I was glad that he didn't come over to me because I'm not sure how I would have handled it. Carol then said goodbye to her friends. She obviously wanted to hang around because the party was still going strong, but she respected my wishes, and we left the party as quickly as I could. The drive home was somber. Carol casually mentioned how much fun she had and how nice everything was. I just nodded and kept silent. Carol chattered on about some of her friends and how nice Jim had everything set up, but my silence meant that the atmosphere was strained. By the time we got home, the whole thing was a setup: Jim's invitation, Jenny's sleepover the same night, and his bimbo girlfriend trying to make a fool out of me. I was being manipulated, and it was galling. But I held my tongue, and Carol was relieved that I didn't make a scene since the evening, up until now, was all planned out. I wasn't surprised when my clever wife began to make amorous advances. From the time we got home, she was acting sweet, touching, and kissing me all the way to the bedroom. It had been quite a while since we had sex, probably more than a month. Despite my irritation with my conniving wife, Carol's a sexy woman. Tonight she was dressed to tease and please, and by this time, I was horny as a goat. I refused and turned the other way. I just lay there in the dark, thinking about the party we went to. I replayed the evening when she was dancing and having fun. I remembered her speaking to Jim and how he kept glancing over at me while they talked. It was all contrived, they were manipulating me. I replayed every second of their conversation and kept thinking about Carol's giddy reaction as they talked. I also remembered the night when she decided to go with Jim and when she got home, how comfortable she was hugging and kissing him, and how anxious she was to get him onto the sofa. I know she was drunk and horny, but something about their friendly relationship didn't seem right. Jim's reaction also bothered me. He seemed to enjoy making out with my wife, but worried about the location. I'm not sure that he wouldn't have taken up on her offer if Jenny and I weren't there. I know that he's been a friend for decades, but the way he made out with my wife and how they were so friendly seemed wrong. Have they done this before? Maybe this wasn't the first time they dated. I tried to put these paranoid feelings aside because I wanted to trust Carol, and I used to trust him. Inside my head, a little voice was whispering caution. Over dinner, Carol was quite animated about the party we went to. There was no mention of the charity event. Jim called me a few times after his party, but I didn't answer and just let it go to voicemail. His message was that he was glad that we came to his house and that he'd like to get together again real soon. He wanted us to get back to being friends, and he'd go more than halfway to get there. I told Carol that Jim was calling me, but I wished he wouldn't. She seemed pleased to hear that we had contact. She asked if she could invite him over for dinner. When I told her no, Carol frowned, and we had another argument. She eventually told me to just get over my hissy fit, as she so delicately put it, and kept reminding me what a good friend Jim was and how he'd been there to help us. I knew he was successful at his sales job and made more than me. I was sick of hearing her praising him so often but kept my mouth shut. I guess Carol thought that everything was back to normal between us, probably Jenny did too. She was now talking about Jim as if he was still my friend. I wasn't actually there yet, but in the interest of keeping the family atmosphere pleasant, I held my tongue. That turned out to be a big mistake. I tried to keep tabs on Carol, but since she worked part-time and I was very busy at my job, it wasn't possible. She was home each night when I got home, and she always had dinner ready for Jenny and me. We tried to have sex, but she seemed distracted at times, like she was just going through the motions. Of course, I got off, but if I expected all the little kisses and touches our lovemaking had been before, that didn't happen anymore. I was disappointed in our degraded relationship, but with my job taking so much of my energy, I didn't have the patience to address it. Carol didn't seem like it bothered her at all. She kept up the house, kept Jenny taken care of, and we were barely making love now. I guess I should have been happy for that. I managed to get off early one night and wanted to take Carol out to dinner. An early evening lately meant getting home before 6 o'clock. It would be a late dinner for us, but I thought I could get Jenny to stay over at her friend's house that night, and we could go out later. Of course, our finances were stretched, but I thought we needed some time to reconnect. It had been weeks since we'd gone out together on a real date. I called home, but Carol wasn't there, so I called her at work that afternoon, and a woman answered and told me that Carol wasn't available. Oh, all right. Will she be available later? I asked. No, not today. She took the afternoon off, she told me. She should be back on Monday, though. Can I take a message? No, I'll try her then, I said, perplexed. She wasn't at work, she hadn't called me and never mentioned that she had plans to take the day off. I called her cell phone and it rolled over to voicemail, so I left a message. Hi Carol, just wanted to ask you out for dinner tonight. I miss taking you out and would love to take you to a nice place and show you off. Please call me back and I'll make all the arrangements. Normally, I'd get home by 7 or later. I guess she expected me then, but I was pissed when she didn't call me back until nearly 6 o'clock. It was too late to make arrangements for Jenny. Hi Mark, she said cheerfully. Sorry I missed your call, honey. I wanted to take you out, I sighed. I guess now it's too late. Oh, I'm so sorry, baby. I had to meet with a client, you know, it ran a little late, so I couldn't get back to you. Okay, then. See you at home, right? Love you. Love you too. The conversation was weird. Meet with a client? When did Carol start meeting with clients? Her coworker never mentioned that. Why take the day off, and why was her phone off? I hardly ever called during the day, so she had no reason to expect me to. But the whole thing stunk, and I wasn't sure why. I picked up some pizza and just went home. When I got there, both Carol and Jenny were waiting. Jenny was happy about the pizza, and Carol apologized about missing my call. I didn't question her about it, but it was strange and had me thinking bad thoughts. That night, Carol informed me that there was a big party at the Royal Hotel this weekend, and she wanted to go. It's going to be wonderful, Mark, she gushed, before she saw my dark look and quipped, now don't look at me like that, I know what you're thinking. She said quickly, don't worry, honey, it's not going to cost you anything. There's no cover charge for this, and my company is picking up the tab for the dinner and drinks. It's some kind of a public relations gig to attract customers. There's also going to be a band, dancing, and everything. We're going to have a blast this weekend. Are you sure we're free this weekend? Carol shot me a goofy grin and snickered, oh, stop it, you wet blanket, you. You know we are. We don't go anywhere anymore. And don't worry, you won't have to pay a dime. I listened to her excitement about this party. I wished there was some way out of it, but she had her mind made up. I just hoped everything would go all right. Despite my reluctance, I was actually looking forward to taking her to this party. My wife is very attractive and fun. I wanted to take her to a nice private dinner and maybe some dancing, but we needed a night out together, and maybe this public party was it. Little did I know, the night before the party, she hit me with the rest of the story. She was mentioning details of the party when she said, in a suspicious manner, "And you know Jim's going to be there too, honey." Jim? What the hell, I didn't know that. We were finishing dinner, and Jenny was already in her room. Carol was just staring at her plate, moving the food around with her fork. "Honey, Jim said he would be there," I blurted out with surprise. "You spoke to him?" When she looked startled for a second but regained her composure quickly, I heard from someone at work. "Work?" I said, without looking up. "Why is Jim going to be there?" "I think he's dating one of the clients." "You mean that woman he had at his party?" "No, not her, somebody else." "I think Jim's going to be there," I repeated angrily. Then I asked, "Tell me the truth, Carol. Have you spoken to him about this dance party?" She glanced up at me with a guilty look and mumbled, "No, not really. I just heard something, maybe. I forget." "He called you, didn't he?" I accused, feeling a knot in my stomach. "I guess, maybe," she said, her casual attitude suddenly transformed to irritation. "Yes, he called me." "So what?" "You know I don't like that prick," I spat. "And now I find out you're speaking to him behind my back." "It's not like that," she answered. "He's a friend. He just called up to say he'd be there and hoped we would too." I stood up with an angry expression, shoved the rest of my food into the trash, and rinsed off my plate. "That's just great," I sneered. "After all we've been through, you're talking to that a-hole behind my back." "He's our friend, Mark." "My friend too," she said defensively. "He's no friend of mine, and you're calling him and probably sneaking around with him behind my back," I retorted. Her eyes looked straight at me as she stated firmly, "You can't tell me who to talk to. I'm a grown woman, and I can choose my own friends. I just wanted you to know ahead of time that he'll be there. I was just being polite and didn't want to spring it on you and make you think that it was some setup. Can't you see that?" Yeah, I see exactly. I already told you that I want you to stop talking to him." "I guess you don't give a damn about my feelings," I said. "That's not true. I just don't have any contact with him, you hear?" "No, damn it, Mark, I'll talk to him if I want," she replied curtly. "He's a friend, and I will not shut him out. If you want to ignore Jim, I can't stop you, but I'm not going to turn my back on a friend of ours." "So that's it?" I asked. "Yes," she said with sympathy, placing her hand on mine. "I don't want you to be mad. I want my husband back. Please go to this party with me. All my friends will be there. It's important to me, honey." I left it like that. I was going, but I wasn't happy about it. The night of the party, I drove Jenny over to her friend's house. She was going to stay the night so Carol and I could party as late as we liked. Carol spent most of the evening getting ready. She had her hair done and her makeup too. I just had to put on a suit and shoes, which took me about 10 minutes. Carol must have spent over an hour in the bedroom. When she came down, she looked stunning in a skimpy black cocktail dress that displayed her sumptuous curves to the max. "Where'd you get that dress?" "I've never seen it before," I said immediately, a dark thought hitting my mind. "I bought it with my own money, Mark, so don't get all pissy about where it came from. I do make money, you know, even though it's not as much as you. And I also bought the shoes too, if you're wondering," she said, shooting me a gloating smirk. "Are you ready?" she asked, slipping her arm into mine. We went out on the porch to wait for Jim. My jaw dropped. "Jim?" I gasped with surprise. "What do you mean Jim's going to pick us up and take us there?" "That's right," she said, as if I already must have known. "That way you can drink if you want." "But why?" I sputtered. "We can just drive over there. I don't need to go with him." Carol held my gaze and spoke with determination. I already spoke to him, and he's coming over right now. You spoke to him? My God, but why? I wasn't exactly sure if you were going, she explained in a reasonable tone. I thought you might try to blow me off and just not go. Jim's a gentleman, and he said he would take me if you didn't show up. So he's on his way over right now. If you want to go, be ready in 10 minutes, Mark, or we're leaving without you. Damn it, I shot back, growing more angry by the second. So you weren't going to wait for me, huh? Well, why don't you and Jim just go without me? Maybe I didn't want to go anyway. Carol's expression grew angry, like I'd never seen. Her cheeks turned bright red, and smoke seemed to be coming out of her ears. She snorted angrily, stood up, and stomped her way into the kitchen. Do what you want, you hole, she shot over her shoulder. I could hear Carol pouring herself a glass of wine in the kitchen. I took a deep breath and shrugged, trying to make some sense of this latest change of plans. I went to the bathroom to wash my face to calm down. While I was there, the doorbell rang, and I knew Jim had arrived. Carol must have let him in, and I could hear them speaking, probably about me. I couldn't hear what Jim said, but I was angry that he was so involved with us again. When I came down, I saw them chatting. My blood boiled, and I could not hold it any longer. I told Carol, since you two already planned to go together, leave. Come on, honey, don't behave like that, Carol mumbled. I don't want to go if he is going with us. I wanted to go with my wife, not his friend, I said. I saw Carol stand up and leave. I guess the marriage was over now. She returned later that night and just got in bed. Next morning, Carol was still giving me the cold shoulder, but we did speak about normal things at times, the girls' schedule, household chores, and such. But there was a lack of warmth that was obvious. Work was giving me a hard time as well. My boss had me working late most nights, so I guess I wasn't around as much as I would have liked. One evening, I got off early and came home to find Jim in the kitchen, having coffee with Carol. I nearly exploded, but they barely reacted when I came in. When I asked him why he was there, he seemed a bit unsure before Carol mentioned if she needed some boxes brought down from the attic, and since I wasn't around, she asked him to help. Jim would just nod and tell me it was on the way home from work, so it was no problem. I accepted her explanation and went upstairs to shower. When I came down, he was gone. I had another hard week at work, it sucked so much. I was desperate to keep things calm. When I finally got home, somehow Carol seemed to have accepted Jim back into our house. Any complaint I had about that was met with a huge argument. A couple of times when I got home late, I found out Jim had already eaten dinner with my family, while I ate the leftovers. Jenny was very excited and told me Jim had given her a new pair of sneakers. Another time she said he bought her a jacket. Each time she relayed this info to me, she seemed delighted to have him around. Carol did as well. One evening I got home and found that Carol had fixed some great food. Jim was there again, and they were all chatting loudly as I walked in. Carol glanced at me without speaking, almost daring me to make a fuss. When I didn't, they went back to their conversation, ignoring me as I sat down to join them. It was around this time when I began to feel like a third wheel, basically an outsider in my own home. Carol and I were speaking, but barely, and sex was not happening. I couldn't help feeling that Carol really didn't care if I was there or not. When Jim was there when I got home, he acted friendly and asked me about my work. He acted like he wanted to know how things were going, so I replied, not wanting to make a fuss about his presence. But soon I began to resent how often he was around and how eager my whole family seemed to be to accept him there. One evening, after a particularly long visit, I took Jim out onto the back patio to have a word with him. I expressed that I was uncomfortable with him being around so much. I told him that if he came over from now on, I'd like a phone call beforehand because it was only polite to call me first. He listened in silence, gazing at me with a strange, disinterested expression. He said, no problem, that he didn't want to cause any problems, and he'd respect my wishes from now on. I thought that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. That evening, when Carol and I got in bed, I remembered how she had reacted during dinner, seeming to be in a great mood, chatting and laughing at things Jim said. I also thought about my conversation with Jim. I'd been working late a lot, and Carol and I were not together much anymore. Something inside told me that I needed to reconnect with my lovely wife on a physical level. Since she was in such a good mood, I thought tonight was the night to begin to put our relationship back on track. After the great dinner, I helped my wife clean up. She seemed to be in an unusually good mood, and we were speaking normally for a change. Jenny went to bed, and I followed my wife to the bedroom. I began throwing some subtle hints to my wife for sex. I knew she could tell that I was horny, but she didn't respond. She didn't shut me down, but wasn't receptive to any of my advances. When she finished cleaning up in the bathroom, she emerged wearing her long flannel nightgown, which was a silent message that she wasn't interested in anything physical. Once she was under the covers, I moved closer and snuggled against her flannel-clad body. My hand landed on her stomach, and I felt her stiffen. She immediately pushed my hand away and turned over on her side, with her back facing me. Normally, I just give up, but I was still upset about having Jim over, and it had been quite a while since we had sex. Just the sight of her hair and the warmth of her body had me hard and aching for release. Jenny was asleep, and it wasn't that late, so I decided to ignore her unspoken rejection and went forward, hoping she'd change her mind. I slid over behind her, held her hips, and began to spoon against her body. "Honey, you look so sexy tonight." "I really am turned on," I told her softly as I began to push near her body. "Not tonight, Mark." When I didn't stop, she repeated. I said, "Not tonight, I'm tired, maybe some other time, okay?" I was stung by her rejection. It had been weeks since I enjoyed her charms, more than a month. I decided that I wasn't taking no for an answer. "Come on, baby, it's been a while, you know how much you turn me on," I said, hoping she'd change her mind. She pushed my hand off of her and repeated, "Not tonight." I kept trying to hold her until she spun around and told me in a rather harsh tone of voice, "Will you stop?" I said I was tired, and I meant it. "What the hell, Carol?" I snapped back. "You've been shutting me out for weeks now." "What am I, a monk?" "I'm just tired, please don't make a big deal about this," she said, sitting up and throwing the covers back. I gazed down at her angrily. "What the hell's going on, Carol?" I flipped on the light next to our bed and said, "We haven't made love in over a month, you've been distant and mean for weeks. Is there something wrong with you?" "With me?" "You may have forgotten, but I'm still your husband, and you have to talk to me." I guess my angry tone and harsh expression finally got through. She turned over and gazed up at me, her blue eyes flashing anger. "You are **** hole," she snapped. "I told you I'm tired, but you don't seem to care a bit about how I feel. To you, I take care of the kids and the house, and I stay home waiting for you, but you never take me out, you never bring me flowers anymore, or even come home on time. Now you want to just screw me, satisfy your filthy pleasure, and go to sleep." "Filthy pleasure? What?" I was caught off guard by her bitterness. I drew back from her angry outburst as she sat up and shook her finger in my face. "You selfish creep! I've given up so much, and all right then, Mark, you want some sex, is that it? Is that what it'll take for you to leave me alone?" In one quick motion, Carol pulled her nightgown up to her waist, lay back down with her eyes closed, and spread her legs. I gazed at her, wondering who this vindictive woman was lying next to me. "Well," she said, glaring at me, "don't just sit there with a stupid look on your face. Just put it in. Put your little wiener in me and screw me. That's all you wanted, right? A piece of meat. So, get to it and hurry up so I can get some sleep." I was stunned, filled with mixed emotions. She opened her eyes and glared at me like I was some lecherous old man. There was no love at all. I decided to just lay back down and forget it, but Carol didn't seem to want to stop. She was on a roll and wasn't going to let it go. She looked down and saw that my tool had already gone soft. "Come on, Mark," she coaxed with a weird grin. "What's the matter, honey?" Lose your cool now that your wife is ready to put out? Are you done? I bet Jim wouldn't refuse me. He wouldn't lose his hard-on if I gave it up to him. You're such a loser. Damn it, you can't get it up if the woman is not totally compliant. Hey, she continued. Well, honey, are you ready? She smiled wickedly and chuckled. I thought so. She closed her legs and pulled the cover over herself. I heard her whisper loud enough for me to hear, loser. Her last remark totally pissed me off. You witch! I cried. I guess you're just Jim's meat now. I bolted off the bed, headed for the door. Behind me, she screamed, you asshole. At least he's not a loser like you. I stomped out of the room before I did something rash. I nearly ripped the bedroom door off the hinges when I slammed it. I knew the whole house shook and felt bad that Jenny had probably woken up from the yelling. My temper was nearly overwhelming my good sense. I've never been so angry at her before. This was even worse than the night after the charity event. The next morning, I got up still upset. Carol didn't speak about what happened at night, and neither did I. She fixed Jenny's breakfast as I left the house without saying a word. I barely slept and was spitting mad as I left the house. I knew that something was seriously wrong with my marriage. A couple of days later, I got home from work and saw Jim's car in the driveway. I was not happy about that. I was home from work on time for a change and hoped Carol and I could speak tonight, have dinner and family night without him around. So, I was quite upset to see he was here again. Since the night of our blow-up, we hadn't spoken. I knew she was unhappy about the argument, and so was I. I hoped we'd eventually talk about it and get over it, but we haven't. I thought that maybe tonight was the night. When I saw his car and knew he hadn't called, I was disturbed. I just had to remind him of his promise later. But at the same time, I knew how much Carol liked having him around and was hoping his presence would somehow thaw out our cool marital relationship. A fun visit over dinner with a friend might help things. Maybe Carol and I could even have sex again if she'd calmed down. I entered the house and was surprised to find them together on the sofa. Hi, honey, I called out. I looked at him and said abruptly, Jim, hello. Mark, he replied in a subdued tone. What's for dinner? I asked my wife as I hung up my jacket. Carol gazed at me with a blank stare, looking through me. She replied, there's roast beef and veggies in the fridge you can heat up in the microwave. She spoke calmly, with no emotion, as she pointed to the recliner. But first, can you sit down here, Mark? We need to speak to you. We? That was strange. I remained standing, surprised at her strange monotone and the distant look on her face. I began to wonder what she wanted to tell me that was so important. Maybe someone died, she was fired, or maybe she was pregnant. What's up, honey? Where's Jenny? She's having a sleepover at Becky's on a school night. You didn't tell me. Ignoring my question, Carol asked, would you like a drink, Mark? Maybe a glass of wine or a beer? No, I'm fine, I replied. Her face showed little emotion. I also noticed how close she and Jim were on the sofa. Usually, they'd be at the kitchen table when I got home, so the close seating arrangement was unusual. Carol took a sip of her wine and then turned to me. There's something we need to discuss, Mark. Why don't you have a seat? She gestured to the recliner again and glanced over at Jim. He glanced back, giving her a subtle nod. What's going on here? I blurted out, feeling quite uncomfortable. Please sit down, she said more forcefully, pointing to the chair. With serious trepidation, I sat down in the chair across from them. Mark, there's no easy way to say this, she took a breath, and then the words flowed out. You know I love you and Jenny, but things have not been good between us for a while now. I know you are working hard for the family, and you are a good father, but there's something wrong with our marriage. What? I whispered, my throat constricting. Our marriage? I glanced at my ex-best friend for clarity and found him staring at the floor. Carol took another sip, glanced back at him, and then continued. "You're the sickest asshole. I must have called him a few more names, but I don't remember. Losing my wife and threatening to take my precious baby suddenly made me insane. I turned my anger toward my former best friend and made my first big mistake. You creep, I'll kill you," I cried, launching myself at the big guy and flinging a fist at his face. Jim's taller than me and a lot heavier. He had always been big and athletic ever since I knew him. He easily deflected my punch, shoved me into an end table, and I stumbled onto the floor, embarrassed and in emotional pain. I hit the ground and sprung to my feet. Carol let out a scream. "No, stop it," she cried. As I launched another swing at Jim, this time he caught my fist in midair with as little effort as if he was holding back a little kid. Fighting has never been my strong point, so I guess it was stupid to attack him like this. "Damn it, Mark!" Jim shouted, shoving me back into a nearby chair. "Just listen for a minute and get control of yourself." Carol was standing next to him, staring down at me with a look of disbelief, pity, and amazement. Jim deflected my attack with so little effort I felt humiliated. "Please, Mark," she pleaded. "It doesn't have to be this way. Jim and I are asking nothing from you. He makes enough to support me and Jenny without a problem. Jenny will always be your daughter, and of course, I'll give you generous visitation rights." "Never," I replied. "Come on, Mark," Jim said with pity. "You may not think so right now, but we can still be friends. You know I care about you, but I love Carol. I know this will take some time, and I'm going to help as much as I can." He took a breath and said, "We can't help that we fell in love, man. Just accept that and everything will be a lot smoother. I know you don't believe me right now, but we both still care about you a lot. I'll help you get over this, and Jenny will always know that you're her father. I'll not get in the way of your relationship with her. That will never change." I was still smarting from my humiliating beat down. Carol was watching, sobbing a little, but her expression was more pity than sympathy. Big Jim just stood there, waiting for my next reaction. I knew he worked out regularly. Of course, he had a lot of time to do that, being single and not having to provide for a family. My job and family responsibilities left me with almost no free time. I was out of shape, being too busy working long hours to support my family. I could never take him in a fair fight, but my anger overcame my good sense, and I wasn't giving up yet. I acted like I was calming down and stood back up. As I straightened my clothes and took a deep breath, they both were watching me warily. Carol had on high heels, so she was nearly at my height. Jim was much taller and looked down at me as I shot him a look of pure hate. Well, this sure has come as a surprise. The two people I trust more in the whole world have just stabbed me in the back. "I'm sorry," Carol whimpered. "I just couldn't let you go on thinking we were fine. We couldn't do that to you." "Yeah, right," I whispered dejectedly. "Well, screw you both." "Please, Mark," Jim said. "I feel terrible about this, you know, but we respect you too much to just go behind your back. We still care about you a lot." "Yeah, I can tell," I said sarcastically. "Please understand," Carol said with sad eyes. "I didn't mean for it to work out like this. It just happened. I'm so sorry, honey." She went to hug me, but I surprised them both and pushed her back against him hard. She stumbled and fell back against Jim's chest, and he caught her before she fell down. In the split second he caught her, he was vulnerable. I quickly swung my fist as hard as I could and with all my strength slammed it into Jim's head. At the last second, he saw it coming, and his eyes widened. His face gnashed as my knuckles came crashing into his nose. There was a sickening thud of bone snapping and blood splattering onto our carpet. Carol screamed out in a panic. "No," as she watched the guy collapse at her feet, blood spurting from his nose like a fountain. He was woozy but still coherent. I was on him in a second, swinging my fists into his bleeding face, but he recovered quickly. He took a few blows to the head and then pushed me away. "You idiot," he shouted in a weird nasal tone. He started to come at me, but Carol pulled his arm. "No, Jim, don't," she cried, holding him back. I wanted him to come at me, but he just stood there, wincing, his nose dripping with blood. "Come on, wife stealer." I tried to goad him into a fight, accusing him of stealing her behind my back, but he just stood there, a gutless creep. In a fair fight, you need a woman to protect you. You can't fight your own battles, hiding behind a woman's skirt. What's wrong with you, you loser? His eyes were raging, but Carol clung to his arm. I guess he knew he was the eventual winner, getting my wife in the end. "Scream, Mark," he finally said. "You're lucky she's here to protect you. Don't pull this again, or I'm going to kick your bum." "Big talk," I growled, my hands in a fighting stance. Jim relaxed and let Carol pull him away. He took out a handkerchief and mopped up the blood flowing from his nose. The two of them proceeded to the front door in silence before Carol turned back to me angrily. "It didn't have to be this way, Mark," Carol snapped. "We tried to let you down easily, but you had to get physical." "Screw you, and screw him too," I told her bitterly. "Oh, I guess you've already done that," which, Carol's face twisted in anger, but she didn't speak. I then noticed the two suitcases sitting by the closet. Jim picked one up and headed for the front door, casting me angry glances as he left. Carol picked up the smaller one and followed him out the door. She stopped once, looking back at me like she wanted to say something, but instead just turned and left. As they drove off, I bolted to my car and drove like a maniac to Becky's house. I parked and ran to the front door, knocking on it in a panic. Becky's mother answered with a sad look on her face. Thank you for watching part 2. Please subscribe to the channel and please click the link to part 3 below the description. If you find these content useful, please share them with your friends and family. Thank you for your support and have a great day.